The gambling halls buzzed with excitement as alien species from across the galaxy placed their bets. Crystalline beings clinked their mineral fingers against betting terminals, while furry creatures with 6 arms calculated odds on floating data pads. The air thrummed with a dozen different languages, all discussing the same thing: who would survive the first round of the grand tournament. Maya Rodriguez stepped off the transport shuttle and immediately felt the weight of 1,000 stares. The docking bay fell silent as conversations stopped mid-sentence. She was human, and that meant she was already dead in their eyes. Her worn military jacket and simple combat boots looked pathetic next to the gleaming armor and natural weapons of the other fighters. A purple-skinned official with 4 eyes scanned his tablet and frowned. "You are the Earth representative?" "That's right," Maya said, shouldering her small equipment bag. The official's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "The registration deadline passed 3 cycles ago. Humans were expected to forfeit. I made it, didn't I?" Around them, alien fighters snorted and growled their amusement. A massive reptilian creature with scales like armor plates leaned against a support beam, watching Maya with golden eyes. This was Gorvak the Unstoppable, champion of the galaxy for 12 straight years. He stood 8 feet tall with claws that could tear through steel, and his reputation for brutality was legendary across star systems. "Look at this," rumbled a bear-like creature covered in thick fur. The soft skins finally sent someone. "How long do you think she'll last?" 30 seconds, hissed a snake-like alien with 6 arms. "Maybe less if Gorvak draws her in the first round." Maya ignored the comments and followed the official through the station's corridors. The Galactic Combat Arena was a marvel of engineering, a massive space station that had orbited the neutral world of Nexus 7 for 3 centuries. Its central arena could hold 50,000 spectators, with viewing galleries that extended into space itself. This was where the galaxy's warrior hierarchy was decided every 5 years. The tournament rules were simple: single combat, no weapons. Except what nature provided, fight until one opponent could no longer continue. Each species sent their finest warrior to prove their superiority. For 300 years, the same species had dominated. The Saurians with their natural armor and strength, the Vorthan with their ability to shift between solid and energy forms, the heavy worlders whose bones were like titanium. Humans had never participated before. Earth was considered a backwater planet whose people relied too heavily on technology. They were known as the soft ones throughout the galaxy, a species that survived through tools rather than natural ability. Most aliens believed humans would die out within a generation if their machines stopped working. Maya was assigned quarters in the lowest level of the station, where the air recyclers hummed loudly and the walls vibrated from the massive engines. The other fighters received luxury suites near the arena level. She didn't mind. She'd slept in worse places during the colonial wars. She unpacked her few belongings and pulled out a datapad filled with research. For months, she'd studied every recording of previous tournaments she could find. She'd analyzed fighting styles, identified patterns, and memorized the physical capabilities of every major species. Her military training had taught her that information was the most powerful weapon. The viewing screen in her quarters showed highlights from past tournaments. Gorvak dominated every clip, moving with surprising speed for his size. His scales deflected most attacks, and his claws could punch through armor plating. In 12 years, no opponent had lasted more than 10 minutes against him. A chime sounded, announcing the tournament bracket release. Maya activated her wall screen and watched as the computerized selection system assigned matchups. Her first opponent would be Kano the Render, a warrior from the Ursine Confederacy, the bear-like creature she'd seen in the docking bay. In her quarters, Maya opened her equipment bag and removed a small device no larger than her palm. It looked like a simple scanner, but she'd modified it to analyze electromagnetic frequencies. Most aliens relied on their natural abilities so completely that they never considered technological countermeasures. She spent the next several hours reviewing everything she could find about Ursine physiology. They were incredibly strong, with claws designed for tearing and thick fur that provided natural armor, but they were also creatures of habit, following predictable attack patterns that had served them well on their home world. The station's artificial night cycle began, dimming. The lights throughout the corridors. Maya could hear the other fighters socializing in the upper levels, their voices carrying through the ventilation systems. They were confident, celebrating their presumed victories before the tournament even began. Maya reviewed her notes one more time. Every species in the tournament had evolved to excel in single combat. The Saurians had become perfect predators. The Vorthon had developed energy manipulation. The heavy worlders had adapted to crushing gravity. Each had a biological advantage that made them superior warriors. Humans were different. They'd evolved on a world where they weren't the strongest, fastest, or most dangerous creatures. Instead, they'd developed something else: the ability to think, adapt, and overcome challenges through intelligence and perseverance. They were the only species that regularly defeated opponents stronger than themselves. The tournament would begin in 12 hours. Maya turned off her datapad and tried to rest, but sleep didn't come easily. She could feel the station's vibrations and hear the distant sounds of alien conversations. Tomorrow, she would step into an arena designed for creatures far more physically capable than herself. But she had advantages they couldn't understand. While every other fighter relied on instinct and natural ability, Maya had spent her entire military career learning to defeat superior opponents through preparation and strategy. She'd studied human history, from ancient gladiators to modern special forces, learning the lessons that came from being the underdog. The galaxy expected her to lose quickly and quietly, providing entertainment before the real fights began. They saw a small, soft human who had no business competing with natural warriors. They were about to discover that being underestimated was humanity's greatest advantage of all. The arena floor trembled under Kano's massive paws as the Ursine warrior circled Maya like a predator sizing up prey. 50,000 alien spectators filled the viewing galleries, their voices creating a wall of sound that echoed off the arenas. Curved walls. Most had come expecting a quick execution before the real matches began. Maya kept her breathing steady and her stance loose. Kano stood 7 feet tall and weighed at least 400 pounds of muscle and bone. His claws were 6 inches long and sharp enough to cut through metal plating. The thick fur covering his body could turn aside most bladed weapons. Every instinct told her to run. Instead, she studied his movement patterns. Kano favored his right side when turning, probably due to an old injury. His breathing was slightly labored despite his size, suggesting his species wasn't built for extended combat. Most importantly, he was overconfident, playing to the crowd instead of focusing entirely on his opponent. The bell sounded and Kano charged with a roar that shook the arena walls. Maya didn't meet his charge head-on like every other warrior would have done. Instead, she dove sideways and rolled behind one of the arena's structural pillars. Kano's claws sparked against metal as he skidded past her position. The crowd booed. This wasn't how gladiatorial combat was supposed to work. Warriors were meant to clash in the center of the arena, testing strength against strength. Maya was breaking the unwritten rules by using tactics instead of courage. Kano spun around, his small eyes glowing with anger. "Stand still and fight, coward." Maya said nothing. She'd learned long ago that talking during combat was a waste of energy. Instead, she moved to keep the pillar between them, forcing Kano to pursue her around the circular structure. Each time, he lunged. She was already gone, staying just out of reach of his claws. "This is embarrassing," muttered the tournament announcer, his voice booming through the arena. "The human appears to be running away from combat entirely." But Maya wasn't running. She was learning. Each charge taught her more about Kano's capabilities and limitations. His speed was impressive for his size, but he couldn't change direction quickly. His claws were deadly, but only if he could connect. His roars were meant to intimidate, but they also telegraphed his attacks. After several minutes of this dance, Kano began to tire. His charges became less explosive, his breathing more labored. Maya had noticed something the crowd couldn't see. Despite his fearsome appearance, Kano's species wasn't built for persistence hunting. They were ambush predators who relied on overwhelming their prey quickly. Maya finally stopped running. She stood in the open arena floor, apparently exhausted and vulnerable. Kano saw his chance and charged with everything he had left, claws extended for a killing blow. At the last possible second, Maya dropped to one knee and braced herself. She'd removed the small electromagnetic device from her equipment bag and activated it just as Kano reached her. The device interfered with the alien's inner ear balance organs, causing him to stumble mid-charge. Kano's own momentum carried him past Maya and into the arena wall with bone-crushing force. He slumped to the ground, unconscious but alive. The arena fell completely silent for nearly 10 seconds before erupting in confused noise. Maya stood and deactivated her device, slipping it back into her pocket. The referee, a multi-armed creature from the tournament organizing committee, seemed uncertain how to proceed. Finally, he raised one arm and declared Maya the winner. "Impossible," breathed the announcer. "The human has defeated Kano the Render through some form of trickery. This victory will surely be investigated." The investigation lasted 3 hours and found nothing illegal. Maya's device was examined and determined to be a simple scanner with minor modifications. The tournament rules said nothing about using technology, only about bringing weapons into the arena. Since the device couldn't directly harm an opponent, it was ruled legal. Maya's second opponent was announced, Vex the Shifting, a Vorthan warrior who could change between solid crystal and pure energy. The Vorthan were considered nearly unbeatable because conventional attacks passed harmlessly through their energy forms. Maya spent the time between matches studying recordings of Vex's previous fights. The Vorthan's strategy was always the same. Shift to energy form to avoid attacks, then solidify at the last second to strike with crystalline fists that could shatter bones. It seemed impossible to counter. But Maya noticed something in the recordings that others had missed. There was always a brief moment during transformation when Vex was neither fully solid nor fully energy. During that split second, he was vulnerable to electromagnetic interference. The betting pools had stopped taking wagers on Maya's survival. No one was willing to risk credits on the possibility that she might win twice. The odds against her defeating Vex were listed as astronomical. When the match began, Vex immediately shifted to energy form, becoming a glowing humanoid shape of pure light. He moved through the arena like lightning, striking at Maya from different angles. Each attack passed harmlessly through empty air as Maya stayed constantly in motion. "The Vorthan is toying with his opponent," the announcer explained. "He could end this match at any moment by solidifying during an attack." Maya waited for her moment. When Vex finally committed to a finishing strike, beginning his transformation back to solid form, she activated her modified scanner. The electromagnetic pulse disrupted his change halfway through, leaving him trapped between states and unable to control his form. Maya struck once with a simple punch to what would have been Vex's solar plexus if he'd been fully human. The blow connected with his partially solid form and sent feedback through his entire energy matrix. Vex collapsed, his body flickering between states before finally stabilizing in solid form, unconscious. Another victory, another stunned silence from the crowd. Maya collected her equipment and walked toward the exit, ignoring the thousands of alien eyes following her movement. In the betting halls, the odds on Maya's survival were quietly adjusted. She was no longer considered guaranteed to lose in the next round. Some of the smarter gamblers began placing small bets on the human, not because they believed she could win the tournament, but because her odds were so favorable that even a few more victories would pay enormous dividends. Maya returned to her quarters and began studying her next opponent. The tournament was far from over, and each victory would make the next fight more difficult. But she was proving something important. To the galaxy, humans might not be the strongest or fastest species, but they were perhaps the most dangerous when underestimated. News feeds across the galaxy buzzed with analysis of the impossible human who kept winning fights she should have lost. Military academies on dozens of worlds dissected recordings of Maya's matches, trying to understand tactics they'd never encountered. For the first time in galactic history, beings were studying human combat doctrine. Maya sat in her cramped quarters, ignoring the constant stream of interview requests and sponsorship offers flooding her communication system. Her focus remained on the task ahead, Throck the Bone Crusher, her semi-final opponent. The heavy worlder had earned his name by literally crushing the bones of 17 previous opponents. Throck's home planet had gravity 3 times stronger than Earth's standard. His species had evolved dense bones, powerful muscles, and skin, tough enough to turn aside most weapons. He stood 6.5 feet tall but weighed nearly 500 pounds of solid muscle. His last opponent, a crystalline warrior from the Outer Rim, had been reduced to powder in under 2 minutes. The viewing screen in Maya's quarters showed crowds gathering on worlds throughout the galaxy. Humans weren't the only ones watching. Now, species that had never paid attention to the tournament were suddenly interested in seeing what this small Earth warrior would do next. Some were cheering for her. Others wanted to see her finally destroyed. A soft chime announced a visitor. Maya opened her door to find an elderly Kepler native, one of the multi-armed species known for their incredible speed. He wore the robes of a tournament official but moved with the fluid grace that marked him as a former fighter. "I am Rael," he said, his forearms gesturing in what Maya recognized as a greeting of respect. "I competed in these tournaments 40 years ago. I have watched every match since." "What do you want?" Maya asked. "To understand," Rael replied. "Your victories make no sense by our standards. You are slower than a Kepler, weaker than a Saurian, less durable than a heavy worlder. Yet you win. How?" Maya studied the old alien's face. She could see genuine curiosity there, not mockery or disbelief. "You really want to know?" Rael nodded with all 4 arms. "Sit down," Maya said, gesturing to the small chair in her quarters. "Let me tell you about human history." For the next hour, Maya explained concepts that no other species had ever needed to develop. She told Rael about asymmetric warfare, about how weaker forces had repeatedly defeated stronger ones throughout human history. She described Sun Tzu's teachings about winning without fighting, Hannibal's use of terrain and psychology, and the guerrilla tactics that had allowed small groups of humans to defeat massive armies. "Your species evolved to be superior warriors," Maya said. "Ours evolved to survive despite being inferior ones. We had to become smarter, more adaptable, more willing to do whatever it took to win." Rael listened in fascination. "And this is how all humans fight?" "Every human who's ever faced a stronger opponent," Maya replied, "which is most of us, most of the time." When Rael left, Maya returned to studying footage of Throck. The heavy worlder's strategy was brutally simple: close distance quickly and crush his opponent before they could escape. His dense bones and thick skin made him nearly impervious to counterattack. Every fighter who had faced him tried the same approach, hit him harder and faster than he could hit back. All had failed. Maya pulled up historical files from her datapad, reviewing battles from Earth's past. She studied everything from Roman gladiators to modern special forces, looking for examples of humans defeating physically superior opponents. The answer was always the same: endurance, intelligence, and the willingness to fight dirty when necessary. The day of the semi-final arrived, and the arena was packed beyond capacity. Viewing galleries that had been empty during the early rounds were now filled with aliens who had traveled across the galaxy to witness the human phenomenon. The betting pools had shifted dramatically. Maya was no longer considered a joke. Throck entered the arena to thunderous applause from his supporters. His species made up a significant portion of the galactic military, and they viewed his inevitable victory as proof of their superiority. He raised his massive fists to the crowd, and the arena shook from the cheering. Maya entered without fanfare, carrying her small equipment bag. She looked tiny compared to Throck, like a child facing an adult. The contrast was so extreme that several species began questioning whether the match was ethical. "Look at the size difference," the announcer said. "This may be the most one-sided contest in tournament history." The bell sounded, and Throck charged with surprising speed for his massive size. Maya didn't run this time. Instead, she did something that shocked every observer. She ran directly toward him. The two fighters met in the center of the arena, but not in the way anyone expected. At the last second, Maya dove between Throck's legs and rolled behind him. As she passed, she struck precisely at the back of his knee with a small metal rod she'd pulled from her equipment. Throck stumbled, but didn't fall. He spun around, swinging a fist that would have pulverized Maya if it had connected. She was already moving, staying just out of reach while striking at pressure points and joints with surgical precision. "The human is using some form of weapon," the announcer called out. The referee examined Maya's metal rod and declared it legal. It was simply a piece of standard equipment, not a designed weapon. Maya was using it like a short staff, targeting nerve clusters and joint connections that would cause maximum disruption with minimum force. Throck grew increasingly frustrated as minutes passed. He couldn't land a solid hit on Maya, who moved constantly and never tried to match his strength directly. Instead, she was slowly wearing him down, strike by strike, like water wearing a waystone. "This is impossible," breathed a Saurian military observer in the VIP section. "She's not fighting him. She's dismantling him." Maya had studied human endurance records and knew something the galaxy didn't. Humans were built for persistence. They could maintain moderate activity levels far longer than almost any other species. While Throck was designed for quick, overwhelming force, Maya could keep moving for hours if necessary. 20 minutes into the match, Throck began to slow. His swings became less precise, his movements less coordinated. Maya had been targeting specific nerve pathways, gradually reducing his mobility and reflexes. She hadn't tried to knock him out or break his bones. She'd simply made it impossible for him to function as a fighter. When Throck finally collapsed from exhaustion and accumulated nerve damage, the arena fell completely silent. Maya stood over her defeated opponent, breathing hard but still functional. She'd just defeated one of the galaxy's most feared warriors without landing a single power blow. The silence stretched for nearly a minute before erupting into chaos. Half the crowd cheered while the other half demanded investigations. Military officials from dozens of species frantically took notes, trying to understand what they'd witnessed. Maya helped the medical team stabilize Throck, who would recover fully within a few days. Then she walked toward the exit, ignoring the thousands of aliens screaming questions at her. She had one more fight to win, and it would be against the most dangerous opponent in the galaxy. But for the first time since arriving at the tournament, Maya allowed herself to believe she might actually have a chance. The entire galaxy watched as Maya Rodriguez stepped into the arena for the final match. Viewing screens in bars, homes, and government buildings displayed the same impossible sight. A human woman barely 5.5 feet tall preparing to face Gorvak the Unstoppable, the most feared warrior in known space. Gorvak emerged from the opposite entrance to a roar that shook the space station's hull. 12 years of dominance had made him more than a champion. He was a living legend. His golden eyes swept the crowd with casual arrogance before settling on Maya. For a moment, she thought she saw amusement in his reptilian features. "So, Gorvak's voice rumbled across the arena floor. The soft skin makes it to the final. I confess I did not expect this entertainment, Maya said nothing. She'd spent the past 3 days studying every second of footage from Gorvak's championship reign. She knew his fighting style better than some of his previous opponents had. More importantly, she'd identified the one weakness that 12 years of easy victories had created: predictability. The referee, clearly nervous about officiating such a historic match, explained the rules one final time. Single combat, no weapons except natural abilities and basic equipment, fight until one opponent could no longer continue. The same rules that had governed the tournament for 3 centuries. Gorvak stretched his massive frame, scales catching, the arena lights like polished armor. Each movement was perfectly controlled, demonstrating the deadly grace that had made him unstoppable. His claws extended and retracted with mechanical precision, each one capable of punching through steel. Plating? I will make this quick, Gorvak said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. You have provided adequate entertainment, but this ends now. The bell sounded, and Gorvak moved with shocking speed for his size. Maya had expected this. She'd watched him open every championship fight the same way for 12 years. Instead of dodging backward like every other opponent, she stepped sideways and kept moving, forcing Gorvak to adjust his attack angle. His claws missed her by inches, sparking against the arena floor where she'd been standing. Maya used his momentary recovery time to strike at his wrist with her metal rod, targeting nerve clusters she'd memorized from Saurian anatomy files. The blow had no visible effect, but Gorvak's eyes widened slightly. Interesting, he said, turning to face her again. You actually studied my species. This time, Gorvak didn't charge blindly. He moved more carefully, using his reach advantage to force Maya to stay at a distance. His fighting style shifted from overwhelming aggression to controlled stalking, like a predator who'd recognized that his prey might be dangerous. Maya continued her constant movement, never staying in one position long enough for Gorvak to pin her down. She struck whenever she could, targeting joints and nerve pathways, but his scales deflected most of her attacks. The few that connected seemed to have minimal effect on his massive frame. Minutes passed, then more minutes. The crowd grew restless as the match continued without a clear victor. This wasn't how Gorvak's fights were supposed to go. His opponents usually lasted less than 10 minutes before being overwhelmed by his superior speed and strength. Why won't you stand still? Gorvak growled, genuine irritation creeping into his voice. Why would I? Maya replied, the first words she'd spoken during the match. For the first time in 12 years, Gorvak found himself in an extended fight. His previous opponents had all tried to match his strength or speed directly, allowing him to end matches quickly with decisive displays of superiority. Maya refused to play by those rules. She treated the arena like a battlefield instead of a gladiatorial ring. Every pillar became cover, every shadow a place to disappear, every moment an opportunity to gather intelligence about her opponent. She wasn't trying to defeat Gorvak through superior combat ability. She was trying to understand him completely. 20 minutes into the match, Maya noticed subtle changes in Gorvak's movements. His left shoulder was slightly stiff, probably from an old injury that had never fully healed. His breathing pattern had shifted, suggesting his stamina wasn't as unlimited as his reputation claimed. Most importantly, his attack patterns were becoming repetitive. Gorvak was a perfect warrior, but perfection had made him predictable. 12 years without a serious challenge had turned his fighting style into a routine. He relied on the same combinations, the same timing, the same psychological pressure that had worked against every previous opponent. You cannot run forever. Soft skin, Gorvak called out, but Maya could hear uncertainty in his voice for the first time. She wasn't running anymore. She was learning. Every exchange taught her more about Gorvak's capabilities and limitations. His speed was impressive, but consistent, meaning she could time his attacks. His strength was overwhelming but required him to commit fully to each strike, creating brief windows of vulnerability. The crowd had grown completely silent, transfixed by something they'd never seen before, Gorvak the Unstoppable being pushed to his limits. Military officials in the VIP sections took frantic notes, recognizing that they were witnessing the emergence of an entirely new form of combat doctrine. 30 minutes into the match, Gorvak's frustration finally showed. His attacks became more aggressive, less controlled. Maya had been waiting for this moment when his legendary discipline would crack under pressure no previous opponent had been able to maintain. "Stand and fight!" Gorvak roared, his voice echoing off the arena walls. "I am fighting," Maya replied calmly. "Just not the way you expected." She was right. Every species in the galaxy understood combat as a test of natural superiority. The strongest, fastest, or most durable warrior won, proving their species' genetic advantages. Maya was demonstrating something completely different, that intelligence, preparation, and adaptability could overcome any natural advantage. Gorvak launched himself, forward in a desperate charge, claws extended for a killing blow. It was the same finishing move he'd used to end dozens of championship fights, refined through years of practice into a perfect display of Saurian supremacy. Maya stepped into his attack instead of away from it, moving closer to danger instead of seeking safety. It was the most fundamentally human response possible. When faced with a superior opponent, change the rules of engagement entirely. The arena held its breath as the galaxy's greatest warrior and its most unexpected challenger collided in the center of the fighting floor. In that moment, 300 years of tournament tradition hung in the balance, waiting to see whether natural superiority or human adaptability would prove stronger. Time seemed to slow as Maya stepped directly into Gorvak's killing strike. Every instinct screamed at her to dodge, to run, to do anything except move closer to the claws that had ended so many lives. But human instincts had been honed by millions of years of being the weakest species on their planet, and sometimes the only way to survive was to do the unexpected. Gorvak's eyes widened in shock as Maya moved inside his guard instead of away from it. His claws passed harmlessly over her head as she ducked beneath his arms, using his own forward momentum to carry him past her position. For a split second, the galaxy's most feared warrior was completely off balance, committed to an attack that had connected with empty air. Maya struck once, precisely, with the metal rod she'd been carrying throughout the tournament. The blow landed exactly where she'd planned it, at the base of Gorvak's skull, where Saurian nerve clusters controlled balance and coordination. It wasn't a killing strike or even a particularly hard one, but it was perfectly placed to disrupt his nervous system at the crucial moment when he was already unstable. Gorvak crashed to the arena floor with thunderous impact, his massive frame skidding across the polished surface before coming to rest against the far wall. The arena fell completely silent, 50,000 alien spectators frozen in disbelief at what they'd just witnessed. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds before the referee, hands shaking, raised his arm to declare Maya the winner. The sound that erupted from the crowd defied description. Part cheer, part scream, part primal howl of species whose fundamental understanding of reality had just been shattered. Maya stood over Gorvak's unconscious form, breathing hard but steady. She'd known this moment would come from the instant she'd stepped off the transport shuttle. Not because she was stronger or faster or more naturally gifted than her opponents, but because she understood something they didn't. Every advantage could be turned into a weakness if you were willing to think differently. Medical teams rushed onto the arena floor to attend to Gorvak, who was already beginning to stir. Maya had been careful with her strike. She'd wanted to win, not to kill. The Saurian champion would recover fully within hours, though his pride might take longer to heal. "Ladies and gentlemen of the galaxy," the announcer's voice echoed through. The arena, still tinged with disbelief, After 12 years of dominance, we have a new champion. Maya Rodriguez of Earth has won the grand tournament. The words triggered chaos throughout the station. In the VIP sections, military leaders from dozens of species frantically discussed the implications of what they'd witnessed. In the betting halls, fortunes changed hands as impossible odds suddenly paid off. On worlds throughout the galaxy, beings who had never heard of humans suddenly wanted to know everything about the species that had just humbled their greatest warrior. Maya walked toward the arena exit, ignoring the pandemonium around her. A reporter managed to intercept her path, shoving a recording device in her face. "How did you do it?" the alien demanded. "How did you defeat Gorvak the Unstoppable?" Maya paused, considering her answer. "I did what humans always do when we face something stronger than us. I adapted." "But your technique," the reporter pressed. "Stepping into his attack instead of away from it. No warrior in galactic history has ever used such a strategy." "No warrior in galactic history ever needed to," Maya replied. "Every species here evolved to be superior fighters. Humans evolved to win fights we should lose." She left the reporter standing there and continued toward the exit. In the corridors beyond the arena, Maya encountered groups of alien spectators who stopped their conversations to stare at her as she passed. Some looked at her with newfound respect, others with fear, and a few with the kind of calculating interest that suggested they were already wondering how to recruit humans for their own military forces. Maya's victory had done more than crown a new tournament champion. It had revealed something the galaxy hadn't known about humanity. They were perhaps the most dangerous species in known space, not because of their natural abilities, but because of their capacity to overcome any natural advantage through intelligence and determination. News of the upset spread faster than light-speed communication as ships carried word to systems too distant for real-time broadcasts. On Earth, crowds gathered in public spaces to watch recordings of the final match, cheering for a woman most of them had never heard of, who had somehow proven that humans belonged among the galaxy's elite warriors. Military academies across civilized space began requesting human exchange officers, wanting to study the tactical thinking that had made the impossible victory possible. Diplomatic missions were hastily organized as species that had dismissed Earth as irrelevant suddenly realized they needed to reconsider humanity's position in galactic affairs. But perhaps the most significant change was in how humans saw themselves. For generations, they'd accepted their role as the soft ones, the species that survived through technology rather than natural prowess. Maya's victory had proven that human adaptability, intelligence, and sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat were weapons more powerful than claws, scales, or superior reflexes. Maya returned to her quarters and began packing her few belongings. The tournament organizers had offered her luxury accommodations, endorsement deals, and a permanent position as a combat instructor. She'd declined them all. She had a transport to catch back to Earth, where she planned to resume her quiet life as a retired military officer. The galaxy would remember this day as the moment when humanity announced their arrival as a major power. Maya would remember it as the day she did her job and went home. For humans, that difference in perspective was perhaps the most dangerous trait of all. As her transport prepared to depart the Nexus 7 system, Maya looked back at the combat arena through the viewport. Somewhere in that massive station, Gorvak was probably awake now, trying to understand how a creature half his size had defeated him with a single perfectly timed strike. The answer was simple, though it would take the galaxy years to fully comprehend it. Maya hadn't beaten Gorvak through superior strength or speed. She'd beaten him by being human, adaptable, persistent, and willing to step into danger when that was the only path to victory. In a universe full of perfect warriors, sometimes the most dangerous opponent was the one who refused to fight by the rules.